I'm Jim Czek. You're watching KelownaNow with me,
Renee Merrifield.
And we're both back in studio today, not all the way from Las Vegas. And again, still lots to talk about. Leadership in Canada, the big question mark.
Oh, it's a crazy race right now, Jim. I'll tell you, it's gotten very interesting. You know, one of my political friends, he said, Renee, there's not going to be an actual leadership race. There's not going to be a membership where they get to actually vote for the Liberals, because the Liberals don't do that. The Liberals all coalesce around one particular leader, and there will be behind the scenes kind of backdoor sort of negotiations going on, where you'll see one by one of the candidates dropping out. And you know, you look at the team around Carney right now, and he clearly looks like to be the favorite. You've got Butts, you've got Telford, and Baines, and once you have the dream team around them, it's hard to infiltrate. That's for sure.
And then he did the big Jon Stewart show. Is that like they just did a thing and saying, like, you know, the Americans are like, when Daniel Smith went down the States and saying that interfering in politics. And here it is, the coronated one, I would say, goes on Jon Stewart for the first big interview. And it was like a sponsored content piece.
You asked a question before we actually started this morning. Was it paid for? I had the same question. Like, was this an actual paid for spot? Is this even real? And then, you know, my mind sort of went to the Conservative leadership race. Now, we know that Poilievre won by, what was it, 62% or 65% on the very first ballot. It was a clear mandate that he received from the Conservative membership. But I think back to his town halls all the way across Canada. Like, he spent hour after hour after hour after hour after hour with people. You know, do you remember the lineups that they used to do for Pierre, where it was literally like you could go and you could have your 2 minutes with him? Now, it was 2 minutes, but every 2 minutes he was listening to what people were saying. He was listening to their concerns. He was listening to what mattered to them. And you see how his messaging has evolved and changed to really be the voice of what Canadians are feeling today. We just had this huge conversation about Justin Trudeau and how out of touch he was and how he had lost the ear of the people. And Mark Carney seems to be starting with no better understanding of where people are at. And in fact, even worse off, because his very first interview before he's even announced is with Jon Stewart, which is the most ridiculous type of an interview you could ever imagine.
Yeah, it wasn't comedy. And it wasn't a hard-hitting interview. I was like at a loss for what it really was, other than it seemed to be just like, come to the Jon Stewart show to announce your platform.
Or was it even an announcement? I have no idea what that was. You know, other than it was a very clear telegraph of what the next election is going to be about. You're going to have Mark Carney, who's going to run on the economy. He's going to run on his economic record under Harper. It wasn't under actually any sort of liberal mandate. It was under Harper's mandate. So he's going to run under that. He talked a lot about the economy, a lot about what he was going to do with the economy, and that's where he's going to do it. His attack was also very clear, because the only thing he said about his opponent, Poilievre, was that Poilievre was a lifetime politician and that he didn't have any real market experience. Well, I don't know if you've read Carney's bio, but talk about not having any real life experience. Being inside the Bank of Canada does not give you real life experience. That's for sure.
The one question I think that I hear a lot is people are puzzled as how can he be the prime minister when he hasn't actually received one single vote from any Canadian? Like, so if the party coronates him, like they say this is going to be the new leader, can he actually be the prime minister without actually getting one single vote from a Canadian?
He can. I mean, he can be the prime minister. He has to get a seat in the House. There will be that protocol that he'll.
So he has to go through an election.
Yeah. So I mean, he'll be in nomenclature, but it won't be. And he'll be the leader, but he won't be actually, coronated. It's going to go to an election. I don't see Jagmeet Singh really ramping up for another handshake across the aisle. So I think that we're going to go to an election this spring. I think that, it will all become clear on March 24th. There'll be a throne speech, and then shortly thereafter, the first order of business will be to make sure that the Canadian people have enough money to get it across April 1st. But with that will come a confidence vote, and that will take down the government.
Yeah, because it'd be political suicide even for Jagmeet Singh to delay this even longer. And then, what is the safest seat left for the Liberals? Is it Justin Trudeau's seat, or which seat is it? When he runs, because they're going to try and pick the safest seat possible for him.
And the only way that he would actually get a seat is if the other parties, and there is sort of I guess it was, a politeness to how we do things, that when a leader is trying to get into a seat, that you don't necessarily put against that person your strongest candidate. You sort of let them, sort of walk into the
I don't
chair.
think the Canadian public is into that.
I know. Right now, the Canadian public is out for blood. They want.
I don't think they're interested.
They want an election. They do not care about the party politics. And even Melanie Joly's interview just this last week, where basically she's saying it's all about the Canadian people. That's why I'm not running. And I'm like, that is the most disingenuous thing to say. Like, the position that we find ourselves in is about anything but the Canadian people.
I find it surprising, though, that a lot of people saying they aren't running, which seems like odd that the news cycle picks up every one of them. But a lot of people aren't even running for MP, though. Anita Anand. A lot of cabinet ministers have already said, Sean Fraser, several of them said they're not going to run. Is that they don't want to face defeat, or what is it?
Absolutely. They don't want to lose. Well, they don't want to lose. And if they have had success in the private sector, they're going to go and go back to that. You look at, Anita Anand, and she is absolutely amazing. I mean, she was a professor at the University of Toronto. She was a lawyer for 20 years before she ever stepped foot inside of politics. She's got a great career ahead of her. She'll be picked up by a Bennett Jones or a Blake's and will absolutely be a government relations sort of consultant.
She's definitely one of the more reasonable ones.
She'll make a lot more money outside of that house than she will inside.
We haven't heard a lot from Stephen Jabo lately. He hasn't said he's not going to run. And the carbon tax, even a lot of the Liberals are saying that's dead regardless of whoever wins government.
I don't know. Carney was talking about not necessarily, on the Stewart show, he was saying that, we need to lower emissions of the oil and gas sector. We have the lowest emissions and some of the highest costs of production in the world right now because of all of our environmental restrictions on our oil and gas sector. I think that's a political suicide move that Carney won't be able to afford. So from my perspective, I think that carbon tax is dead. But I think that it's still dangerous under the Liberals. We don't have another voice. And with Christy Clark, exiting the race, she was sort of the last one that was supporting an exit from the carbon tax altogether. You
mentioned Christy Clark. You just said before we went live that she's bowed out.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. She announced, I believe it was even this morning, that she's not going to be running. That's not surprising considering the week she's had. The media has not been forgiving. They basically queued her up. They had receipts on her conservative membership, and called her out on it. And her response was so bad. And basically she was caught in a lie. When you're caught in a lie, that is not a good start to your race. And I'm sure that, she's smart enough and she is wise enough and she is politically savvy enough to know that starting off on that foot is not going to get you anywhere. Now, having said that, Mark Carney also has had photographs with Ghislaine and
Epstein.
Yeah, Epstein, circulating all over the place, which he's been trying to defend himself. They're not really my friends. They're my sister's friends, my sister-in-law's friends. Like, you know what? I don't care whose friends they are. Those are damning pictures from two convicted felons, and convicted for child trafficking and pornography.
Yeah, and he also has 3 passports.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, so is he a Canadian, or who does he represent? Right?
Absolutely. And when you look at what the week that Christy Clark had versus the week that Mark Carney had, you can see how the media treats women. there is one and done for women politicians, and you don't get a second chance. And that was certainly Christy Clark's week, and against Mark Carney.
I think the misstep for me in Christy Clark was actually trying to blame the Conservatives that they would manufacture information, which I think that was like I think she could have got away with, like I wasn't sure if it actually happened, but to say that the Conservatives would manufacture information, I think that was one step too far.
Well, and it's not wrong to. I mean, I say to myself, like for me. Yes, I believe in social causes, and I'm probably left of center on the social spectrum, but I'm right of center on the fiscal conservatism. Mm-hmm. When I look at who represented me over the course of time, I look at someone like whether it was Paul Martin or previous Liberal leaders, like I could see myself in that. That's not wrong for me to say, nor is it wrong for me to say, hey, I'm falling more into the Conservative line because the Liberals have gone too far left, and they've taken a path that it's just not me. Chrétien, I loved when he came to the event here that you
2019, Level Up.
KelownaNow held. He said, like, are these my Liberals? Like, is this my party even more?
And they've trotted him out, because he's the last, I guess I would say, high value Liberal brand.
Well, because
91 years old, and they've got him on every talk show there is.
And what did he say? My heart's on my left, my pocketbook's on my right.
I think that's a lot of people, myself included.
Totally.
Right,
we want to take care of those in need, but we also want to make sure that we're in a fiscal position to do so with a prosperous nation and people with hope and a future. That is not where we find ourselves today under this Liberal government. So are these, it would have been okay for her to say, hey, look, I'm going to support anyone who has these values.
I think that's all she needed to say.
And that's all she needed to say, because Jean Charest certainly was that representative that would have been more indicative of what her path has been through politics.
One of the comments from Jean Chrétien's interviews that kind of like struck me was the Liberals need to move the party back to the radical center. Radical center?
Radical center.
I say move away from the extreme left might be a better way, just to move it back to the center, because the Liberals used to be like, even when you were in, it was the Liberal Party here was kind of like the centrist party.
Centrist,
the centrist party, and that's what the Liberals used to be, and before Justin Trudeau took them like way past the NDP.
Absolutely. When I say, like, nobody has run more balanced budgets as a prime minister than Chrétien.
Yeah, and we were lucky to have, when you bring up Jean Chrétien was here for 2019. We also had Stephen Harper here. Yes. A lot of people that we communicated with either didn't like Harper, didn't like Chrétien, but after they heard both of them speak, they liked them both. And I think both were very intelligent. Both had a different kind of personality. Stephen Harper, very, very smart economist, and Jean Chrétien, very much like a gritty kind of like authentic kind of guy.
And both ran similar governments. Chrétien's downfall was the sponsorship scandal, where he couldn't find $4 billion and had envelopes of cash going out to Québécois.
That's small change
firms.
Now.
Yeah, no doubt. Considering what we've just endured, so I look at that and that was, arrogance at its best. But when you look at how they ran government, between Harper and Chrétien, they were fairly similar. Yeah. But Harper had a minority government when he first got in, and Jack Layton was his opposition. That was a very powerful merger, or not merger, but offset. Yeah. Where that heart's on the left and the pocketbook's on the right. And Harper then, with the majority government, steered us through one of the worst economic downturns of history.
Mark Carney took all the credit for that.
And Mark Carney took all the credit. Whereas he could not have done what he did without having an economist as our prime minister.
Even Jean Chrétien deserved some credit for that, because he was the one that set the banking regulations when the banks wanted to do all that stuff. Because in that speech, he said, I'm the one that said that they can't do that stuff that the American banks were doing.
Totally true. But when I look, the thing I love about Harper is that he's funny. He's really funny. People don't understand that. Yes, his book was really good, but people don't understand that. They don't understand, kind of his humanity, and he had a very difficult time as a leader showing that humanity. Now you're looking. The clips of him against Trudeau and back in 2015 are emerging all over the place, and he had a lot of sobriety when it came to the policies that Trudeau was about to roll out, and everything that he predicted has basically come true.
We still have both of those speeches here, and I think we'll run them actually, because I think they both
They're very
show good leadership, and then Canada needs some good leadership for sure. And this Chrystia Freeland, though, we haven't heard a lot in the news. Mark Carney seems to dominate, and all the other ones are saying they're not running, but Chrystia Freeland, I haven't seen a lot in the news cycle about her.
No, she's going to be working in the background, and if she doesn't have the support that she needs from the actual powers in the party, which it certainly appears that she does not, it's going to be political suicide for her to take a run for the leadership. The Liberals don't run leadership races, really. They coalesce around one particular coronated leader, and that's Carney right now. And I mean, it's evidenced by who the powers have coalesced around.
Justin Trudeau made that speech after Kamala Harris lost, saying that, like, Americans are, like, had an opportunity for the second time to vote for a female president, and they failed again, and that he's a feminist, he supports women, and he's a friend of women. Here's his big opportunity to support Chrystia Freeland, and what does he do?
Not going to happen.
So I mean,
he's going to support the middle-aged white male.
So his actions are always completely different than his speeches.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I'll go back to what I've said before. Do not believe what a politician says. Totally trust their actions.
Yeah, it's
totally
the actions that define the person.
Actions are everything, and especially in politics.
Yeah, and then it's to me that I don't know why people are playing that over and over and over again. That clip where he's like, he goes out and calls, half of America, more than half of America, misogynists, and then he does the exact same thing.
Yeah, the U.S. is still mad about that. I've seen it coming out on a few different media. And his media, roundtable discussions were absolutely brutal. His interview, Trudeau's interview on CNN, where they asked him directly, like, why are you so unpopular? And he blamed it on everyone else except himself.
Same with Jen Psaki when he did it with Jen Psaki on CNBC.
It's like, oh, come on.
Or MSNBC.
Buddy. Like, what are you doing? You are certainly not garnering any favor from the U.S. population. You're just making it worse for all of us, and you're making it worse for us against Trump, which is the biggest concern. We have a lame duck government that doesn't have a leader. You're watching as Doug Ford and Danielle Smith is down in Mar-a-Lago, like trying to basically get the handshakes and the high fives and have some conversation. This is not going to bode well for Canadians over the next however long it takes us to get an actual government in place, and it's going to be a difficult time.
I haven't seen Trudeau do a Canadian news outlet interview yet since his resignation, but I did see him on CNN. I did see him on MSNBC, and we do see Mark Carney doing an interview on Jon Stewart. So, begs the question, why isn't the CBC losing its mind, or CTV, on not getting those interviews with Trudeau? It's odd.
It's so odd. It's so odd. And, I saw even on social media, Jagmeet Singh, he's back on TikTok, and, he did his big, look, I'm back. And then he did his big speech on, I'm going to go down to Mar-a-Lago and have a conversation with... I'm sitting there going, what are you going to say?
They won't let you in, probably.
Honestly, why are you going, and what are you going to say? And then social media took care of that for me. I was
Melanie Jolie and LeBlanc went down to Mar-a-Lago. They didn't get to meet with Trump. Danielle Smith went down there, and she did get to meet with Trump.
Well, right now you're seeing the premiers take the space where, we don't have a leader. Now, sadly, let's take it back to BC. We do not have a leader who is going to take on Trump, despite the softwood lumber tariffs that still exist and how badly injured our lumber industry is. We do not have a premier who's standing up to Trump in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not sure what he's thinking right now, but he's had some pretty big hits. He lost the court case on the housing file in Kitsilano. That's a huge hit to what their mantra and mandate is. It certainly is pleasantly surprising in terms of the judicial system kind of bringing this government into some checks and balances. We're also seeing the Law Society take on the government and basically say that their takeover of their Law Society is unlawful. And so they've got that court case to run through. But Eby is no stranger to court cases. Even with his ICBC overhaul. I think he, had 4 different court cases on that and lost 3 and won 1. And I mean, he has tied the British Columbian people up in court with using taxpayer dollars to the tune of probably hundreds of millions of dollars in court, trying to support his laws, which have been found to be unlawful and have had to be reversed. Now we've got the Surrey-Guildford vote. That's, I mean, if it's true, it's pretty damning to win only by 22 votes and have 25 of them potentially fraudulent. Is basically the election.
Yeah, they've asked
the total swing of the election towards the Conservatives. So very scary in terms of if that election fraud indeed happened.
Yeah, they've asked for an investigation. The RCMP have not yet engaged, so we shall see what happens there. It's almost like we have a lost decade, though, especially in federally and even provincially, that we're fighting over like stuff that doesn't really matter, like court cases, a lot of different things. Yeah. And our biggest card that we have to play in the world stage, and it seems like a lot of countries really specialize now. Canada is not a manufacturing, that's not our specialty. Canada is not a technology hub. You look to the States, like that's where all the big tech companies are. China's the leading world auto manufacturer. I think Canada is about 1.7% of auto manufacturing. Our biggest card that nobody has is our resources. Totally. And we have governments both in BC and federally that won't play that card, the Trump card, as you could say, to kind of like tie it to Trump. Yeah. That's what he needs from us. That is what we have better than anybody in the world. We need a government that's going to utilize that Trump card for the betterment of Canadians. And how do we get that, I guess? That lost decade, and I'm going to rant a little bit, like in China right now, they have a train that goes 450 kilometers an hour. We don't even have a highway that goes across Canada that's 2-lane all the way. Do you know what I mean? Like 4-lane, I should say. Like we still have parts of the Trans-Canada Highway that are treacherous. Yeah.
And, we've also seen the analysis done of what, a bridge cost us to build 20 years ago and what it costs us today, considering inflation, so taking into account inflation. And the only thing you can liken that to or to attribute that to is to the amount of bureaucracy and legislation that's come into play. Like there is something to be said for what Pierre Poilievre is saying with like get out the gatekeepers and get them out of the way. The reason is that every amount of legislation that we have and bureaucracy that we have over top of any of our whether it's our resource sector, whether it's our tech, if you have laws on your technology, where does technology go? Outside of our borders. Mm-hmm. They also have like looked at the brain drain that's occurred since Trudeau took over. What is that? That's our wealth. That's our creative capital that's leaving our country. I can't say that enough. It is leaving our country because it no longer can afford to be here in our country. So, does this have an effect? Does our government have an effect? Yes, absolutely it does. And are we being, to your point, have we taken our poker chips off the table in terms of our resource sector? 100%. We have nothing to actually sit at the table, which is why Trudeau had to go around the table and crouch down in Mar-a-Lago, because we don't have anything that they actually want.
Yeah, and we can't sell them. I don't even know what they were trying to sell. It's just so frustrating that we have the biggest Trump card in the world, and we don't want to play that card.
And we don't have it anymore. We used to have it, and it is going to take us years to get back there. Yeah. Capital flees. Capital comes back, but it's going to wait to make sure that everything is okay here. I listened to the panel at the BC Business Summit last year, and the VP from Petronas, she said we came to BC because of the political environment, and we're leaving BC because of the political environment. It's not rocket science.
The biggest project I hear about in Canada right now is that Kevin O'Leary is promoting a project with Alberta because of the energy, the LNG, and because AI centers are going to need tremendous amounts of energy. And Alberta, I believe, is the Saudi Arabia of the world, the new Saudi Arabia, because it has a blend of energies between LNG, oil and gas. They have like great solar, they have great wind, they have all kinds of energy. Plus, they can do SMRs there with uranium and the uranium deposits that are in Saskatchewan. So I think Alberta plays a huge role in, as usual, in
generating revenue for Canada. Well, and he's going there because of the political environment.
Yeah.
BC has a larger uranium vein than even Saskatchewan does, but BC has a law in place that says that we can't mine uranium. So without that, the SMRs aren't going to be possible for us. But the political environment in Alberta is such that they could get enough energy to actually create what AI needs. And I mean, that's the thing that people I don't think understand is the amount of electricity AI demands to run. I've said it. I think even here on the show, like, energy is the new water and electricity is the new oil.
Energy is a basic human necessity. It's in everything we do, and yet this current government taxes it like it's a luxury.
Absolutely.
And that's the biggest mistake. We'll end with this. Tech companies, like especially the social platforms, have had a habit recently of shutting out conservative voices. Mark Zuckerberg was on there making that speech and saying that it was the Biden administration that silenced them and made them do different things, and he said he's going to be different. So now, like a lot of people have said, they're leaving, the liberals and the Democrats say they're leaving X because of, Elon allows everybody to speak, and then now they'll have to leave Meta. And then the news this morning was that China's might sell TikTok to Elon Musk because the regulations coming out of the U.S. saying that they either have to sell it or shut it down in the United States.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with TikTok. Obviously that is one that's on the chopping block right now for the U.S. Mark Zuckerberg saying that it's solely the Biden administration that made it the way it was. I'm not sure I buy it. I'm not sure that that's completely truthful. I kind of think that any company, if they wanted to, could.
Elon Musk fought back.
I was going to say could fight back in one way, shape, or form. What I didn't see was Mark doing that before there was a change in government. So, is it just that you behave whatever way, whichever government? Not really. I'm such a value person. I've been accused of being too principled, but I just believe that if you truly hold democracy as something that you value, democracy requires voices around the table. And whenever you try to silence one of those voices, and when I say silence one of those voices, you no longer have democracy.
Yeah, democracy is allowing the people to speak that you don't like,
that you don't
value
their.
Yeah, that's democracy, and that's how we get better. Democracy is not silencing those that don't fit your current opinions and beliefs.
Agreed. So, for me, I'm happy that Meta is going to pull the reins off a little bit, or the muzzle off a little bit. But is Mark Zuckerberg gaining in my eyes? Not necessarily. I think it's a little bit too little, too late from that perspective. And it's scary when someone like Elon Musk has as much power as he does, but he has that power because he's freed democracy, not because he has taken away democracy or silenced those around him. In fact, just the opposite. He lets anyone and everyone have a voice.
I don't know how he does what he does in a day. Like even the California fires, he's set out to his customers. He said, like, you're not going to take delivery of a Cybertruck. We're utilizing all the Cybertrucks right now for the California fires because they're not just a vehicle. They provide power, so they're in, the fire people need them, the police need them, and they're also communications hubs because they also have Starlink in them. And so he's doing all these things that, obviously taking a lot of heat from, like the leftist media, though.
Yeah, but he did the same thing in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Russia's first attack was all on their communications, and he said, "All right, I'm going to pull Starlink satellites, and you'll be up and running again." The one thing that Elon has taught us is to get outside of the grid. Create your own grid, create your own network. And he has done that, whether it's create your own network of communication like Twitter, or create your own network of satellites so you can have communication. regardless of what happens on the grid. If we had politicians that were actually more concerned about mitigation of any disasters and working within the constraints that we'd actually have water and resources and communications that would exist outside of all of these natural disasters. But the reality is we don't. They're running around trying to get votes and, looking at shiny, sparkly objects instead of actually dealing with the underlying aspects. And here's one area where the business community has outpaced all of government combined, and that's why he can have the impact that he is having. And it's a good heads up for us all. If our grid ever got shut down, having a Tesla or having an EV in your garage could be the battery that saves your life.
Yeah, I think that I was just at the CES for a week, and I do see a lot of hope coming. I do see a lot of technology. I do see a lot of different things that are being kind of like deployed, and I think with the right people managing our country and our resources, and I think we are, like at the beginning of a better tomorrow and a more abundance for all.
Yeah, I like that hopeful message. I really do, and I'll echo that. My son graduated from engineering a few years back, I guess about 5 now. And he said, "Ma, there is enough technology out there to solve all of our problems and to really reduce all of our emissions, but we don't have the political will."
Yeah, we just need to focus on the real issues, the real problems. Like you brought up wildfires. We don't stay too long on this, but because we could talk all day on wildfires. Yeah. We need to spend more on mitigation and detection as opposed to spending it on firefighting and allowing, like all this underbrush and all this stuff, like here in Kelowna, everywhere, like move the combustibles away from the homes.
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California, and I was down there a year and a half ago in August with my husband. And, we're standing at the Griffith Observatory, and, he looks across to the Hollywood sign, and he said, "This place is a tinderbox, and it could go up with anything. Like, how are they doing this?" And I said, yeah, the irony is that, look at the rains that they've had, look at the floods that they've had. They have not done a good job of reservoir storage, and that is largely ineptitude when it comes to the bureaucracy and ineptitude when it comes to where the government has been spending. And, you need to look no further than to see these firefighters trying to fight a fire without water. It's absolutely brutal. But the other thing is that if we actually have water there, you can do other things like, I don't know, food production. Amazing. If you have water, you can make food with it. Yeah. And so the fact that we're not focused on these other aspects is just, I think, a real missed opportunity. And the catastrophic casualties from this are part of that collateral damage from policy that's gone awry.
One of the things that struck me in even here recently and in the US and the fires is, why aren't there pumps in the water? Like there's the ocean. Like a lot of the houses were burning on the shorelines. Like even here, I think we finally got a pumper boat. Like a lot of the fires could be fought right from the lake, a continuous flow of water.
Absolutely, and we do need more of that, 100%. We also need to fight our fires very early. The West Side fire, McDougall Creek, that one could have been fought very early on when it was the size of a football field, rather than allowing it to have the winds whip up and have it come all the way over and wreak havoc and devastation the way it did. We need to do a way better job of that. God bless them. We've got the BC family, out there with all of their $4 billion of machinery fighting fires right now down in California.
You're talking about the Coulson
family, yeah.
That don't have one contract in British Columbia.
Not one.
I did an interview with them. They have the largest fleet of large aircraft, and they have refitted 737s. Yeah. And they're all on contract with the United States. And, I know Justin was out there trying to look at Canada's helping. I mean, those contracts is because they can't get a contract here.
No. And it's because our BC Wildfire Service needs a complete overhaul and a complete redo of how we fight fires, of how we actually employ them, of what we have on contract. We should have on contract all year round, and then contract them out to places like California when they have a fire in January, and we're not going to have a fire because we've got snow all in our all in our mountains. So really we need to do a way better job. and also a better job of our infrastructure. One of the things is that the fire hydrants all shut down when you have the fire that blows through. All of a sudden, you have all these water lines that are open, and we saw that in Fort McMurray, where you literally had a spout of water coming up. We need to do a better job of separating off our firefighting and disaster mitigation efforts from our domestic water source, so that we could shut down the domestic water source, redeploy that all through our firefighting efforts, and not have water spouting off unnecessarily after a house has been damaged.
Again, good news on the way, though. They are looking at drones that can help fight fires, and they can do 24/7 with heat vision and that stuff. Whereas, our pilots basically fly in daylight. Yeah.
So can the Coulsons with their night vision helicopters.
Yeah, no, they do an amazing job, and it's just, again, it boggles my mind why they don't do anything. This will be the last. They had the biggest helicopter sitting here in the last fire, sitting on the tarmac at Wild W, never put into the field, and they were super frustrated with that. Totally. They think that the government just doesn't like them. I guess I don't know.
Regardless, government should never put party politics or petty politics over what's best in the best interest of Canadians, British Columbians, etc. So that is a ridiculous excuse.
Again, another great show, and we've gone past our 30 minutes, but 37 minutes, lots of good stuff. Though.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to echo, Jim, just your story of hope. Everything that we need is right at our fingertips. And, Canadians are incredibly resilient and incredibly innovative, and we just have to get back to that place and space of that hope. So I'm glad that you had a good dose of it in Las Vegas last week, and hopefully you can continue to seed that throughout these shows and really in our community.
And hopefully with Meta's change in its the way it's seeing the world, and maybe changing government here, Bill C-18 will be repealed.
Yes.
And Canadians can then access news on platforms that they visit on a daily basis.
100%.
And with that, we thank you for watching Kelowna Now.